Perfect. All right. So, first up on the agenda for Public Works Committee, we have consider the facility conditions assessment vendor. Is Leanne on the line?
I can do it if you'd like.
Sure.
So our small group, which was comprised of Director Bushlick, Assistant Director Colsty, and Trustee Ursink, interviewed 3 firms for the facility condition assessment. Narrowed down our options to 2 of the firms, FGMA and Cooney Wald. Asked them to provide some additional revised submittals that would fall within the scope of our budgeted amount, as well as some additional responses following upon their interviews. And after further review, the group has recommended FGMA to conduct the facility condition assessment.
Thank you, Rebecca. Trustee Baldoff, Trustee Bockhorst, do you have any questions about this process?
No, looks great. Thanks for your participation. Sorry, Melissa. So yeah, ready to move on.
Okay, then we're just looking for a motion that would direct us to proceed with FGMA, and then we will establish a contract which will be listed on the consent agenda for August 2nd.
All right, so I will move to recommend to approve FGMA for the facility condition assessment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, guys. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have Public Works Organization Analysis Recommendations Review. Review transfer station operations to ensure appropriate allocation of costs and to maximize cost efficiency. Is that Leanne or Rebecca?
That is me.
Okay, thank you.
So you may recall that, well, you may recall if you were part of that particular meeting. Last year, the village board identified a number of the 27 or so recommendations in the organizational study as priorities for the coming year. One of those was the review of the transfer station. In particular, the context of the recommendation is the study. In the study was a review of the transfer station to ensure that the current agreement it is equitable and financially, what would the word be? That it would be equitable to both communities. A secondary part of the recommendation that is actually not up for discussion tonight would be to then further review the entirety of the transfer station operations to determine if in fact the village should be in the business of collecting refuse and yard waste, or if that is a service that could more efficiently be contracted out. I think Trustee Bockhorst will likely remember we went through such an exercise about 4 years ago, prior to the RFP for our current waste hauling and recycling contract. And at that time, after a financial analysis, it was determined that that both from a fiscal standpoint and from a customer service standpoint, that our staff could provide a better product to the Shorewood residents than contracting. But certainly that's something that we continue to monitor and evaluate, and that likely will be something that we will formally do again in the relatively near future, as recommended in the organizational study. But for this evening, the focus is on the agreement for transfer station operations. If you are not aware that the transfer station, the physical facility is located in the Shorewood Department of Public Works yard, but the actual capital improvements or components of this station are jointly owned by the villages of Shorewood and Whitefish Bay. And so there is, was a transfer station agreement that was first outlined in 1995 when the station was built. It had a renewal after 10 years in 2005. And so we are currently operating under our second, the third agreement extension, we'll call it. Third agreement, second extension. So the memo does review the actual transfer station agreement, and the relevant points have some additional explanation. And then the memo also then, as you know, reviews some more formal communications that my staff and I have had with Whitefish Bay staff. As mentioned, the organizational study does recommend a review of this, but we actually had undertaken that review well prior to the beginnings of the organizational study. So this is really kind of just wrapping those discussions up and looking for some direction, if any, is willed by the Public Works Committee and then on to the full village board. I would be very happy to review the agreement and then the salient points of each of the letters and back and forth communications between the villages, or I can jump right into what I think are the pressing issues of the day. But I'm happy to do that at your request.
Thank you, Leanne. Yeah, there seems to be a lot wrapped up into this, and I think this is probably a really smart move. I know that it hasn't been really an equitable partnership in the past. Is that correct?
I will say that it does surprise me a bit that the agreement was structured in not necessarily in the way that it was. It does surprise me that at a certain point into the first agreement that it wasn't reviewed. I mean, I think if you're familiar with our models, particularly the North Shore Health Department model, the North Shore Fire Department model, the North Shore Health Department model, they both have elements of different variables that attempt to equalize those costs for the municipalities, both based on their usage and population and some other demographics. I'm a bit surprised that at some point in our past, there wasn't any effort to do that with this agreement. But I was not part of those conversations or privy to any of that. So, I can't really say why that didn't occur. I think the data clearly shows that to this point, it's pretty clear. It's closer to a 60-40 usage factor than an actual true 50-50. However, as you know, the agreement does clearly spell out 50-50. So should we wish to pursue any change to that, that would obviously have to be a formal conversation with the village of Whitefish Bay and clearly, their agreement to such a change as well.
And where do you think that, where do you think that conversation goes with Whitefish Bay? How does that conversation go? Will they be receptive? Is there negotiations? How does that work?
I'm not sure that I'm quite honestly the best person to speak to that. I have a working relationship with my counterpart at Whitefish Bay. Joel has a working relationship with his counterpart at Whitefish Bay. And each of our relationships are a bit different. John and I tend to focus more on the higher level operations or procedures and policies and agreements, whereas Joel and Pat, and prior to Pat, Kevin, they are really in the boots on the ground, the nitty gritty. How do we apply this to both of our operations and make it work successfully? So, and then certainly there's the levels above, which would be Rebecca and her counterpart, and then obviously the two village boards. So I think that probably will need to be communication and conversations at multiple levels, and each of those will be a bit different based on you know, what it is the goal at that particular level is. And you know, that obviously will speak to how that all is approached and plays out. But I think, you know, I'm certainly I'm not concerned that they wouldn't be open to having a conversation. Maybe, you know, we've had and continue to have a very good working relationship, so I have no issues with, you know, a conversation. After that, I think it really becomes a matter of you know, the role and decisions of the elected officials.
That's right. Trustee Sokerbrand, I see your hand, but I'd like to go around to the trustees within the committee first, and then we can go to you. So Trustee Baldhoff or Bockhorst, do you have any questions for Leon or Rebecca?
Yeah, I mean, my question is just, you know, how would you like to proceed, and how would staff like to proceed? I think clearly we're in a situation where, you know, this is not equitable. This is not, you know, our residents are getting kind of the raw end of the deal here, in some way. So my question is just, you know, what do you see as the ideal path forward, and, you know, kind of what's a likely path? You know, I assume that they wouldn't just accept our first offer clearly, because there's been conversation, but, you know, how would you like to proceed? And then kind of what do you think their response would be?
Sure. You know, actually, from my perspective, there are two different and very separate issues, at least. The larger issue that speaks more to the recommendation in the organizational study is that equitable operation of the facility, which is the, you know, currently under agreement is 50-50. Data would indicate a true equitable arrangement is closer to a 60-40 cost appropriation. So certainly that's one aspect. You know, that really is more of a, you know, that is a higher level political discussion. The operation of the center will not change, you know, one iota, regardless of whether we stay at 50-50 or 60-40. I'm going to do the same thing on a daily basis. Joel's going to do the same thing on a daily basis. Our crew's going to do the same thing on a daily basis, as is our counterparts at Whitefish Bay. So whether, you know, if that agreement is reviewed by the respective village boards, that has very little impact operationally on what we do on a day-to-day basis. The bigger operational issues for us are some of those things that were spelled out, you know, in the letters that went back and forth. And I think to a large degree, the only outstanding issue there relates to how we address and continue with the Saturday operations, and which of the communities is responsible for covering the disposal costs from that operation, and which of the communities accepts and manages the payments that are made by residents for the use of that facility each time we're open. Those will have much greater impact operationally and on a day-to-day basis to our department than the actual cost allocation in the agreement will. So in my mind, selfishly, I guess, you know, that's a bigger one for me. Though from a budgetary standpoint, you know, that the 60-40 is, you know, that's not an insignificant amount of money.
Do you have any idea what that is?
I can tell you that it's most certainly, I should not say that. You know, I would guess we're in the realm of, I shouldn't say, because I don't know. But you know, it would matter to me in our budget.
Okay.
It's an amount that would matter to me.
Okay. Well, that's all you need to say, for sure.
Okay. But you know, on the other, we started under the agreement, Shorewood covered the cost of the Saturdays and took in the revenue, and then kept the revenue to offset the cost of, the disposal fees from Saturdays. We can no longer use that model because with the recent trucks purchased by the Village of Whitefish Bay, they actually are too large for the scale facility that we jointly own, and the agreement does not allow for the use of the scale at trucks of that weight. But more importantly, in my mind, the scale was not built or rated for that weight, and it would be improper to use the scale, both from are we getting accurate weight standpoint, and what kind of damage are we doing to that infrastructure that wasn't built to hold trucks of that weight. So we really had to flip that model and say, all right, instead of just billing Whitefish Bay for what we scaled in, and Shorewood just covers the rest of the bill, we like I said, we flipped that, and then basically we subtracted what Shorewood weighed in, and then whatever was left over, we now invoice to Whitefish Bay. That amount of what's left over includes Saturdays. And so Whitefish Bay is saying, which to me is not unreasonable. Well, if we're covering Saturdays, then we should keep all the revenue from Saturdays. My counter to that is there's a lot of administrative work and responsibility that goes into collecting that revenue. And I don't think it's fair that Shorewood puts that work into the revenue and then simply basically turns it over. If in fact Whitefish Bay wants to keep the revenue, then it's my opinion and frankly my recommendation that the Whitefish Bay employees then become responsible for collecting that revenue, taking it to Whitefish Bay Village Hall, having their finance department do the deposit, track the revenue, all of the things that we currently do.
We currently do all of that for them, and we give them the funds.
We have not actually turned over any of the revenue to this point.
Okay. Wow.
Alternatively, I've worked with many of our current employees, and I actually also reached out to one of our former long time route collectors who worked lots of Saturdays in his life after his retirement, and said, hey, if you really had to think hard and look at it and estimate, what do you think a typical Saturday would bring in? What kind of weights are we looking at? How can we average that? So we looked at that. We compared that against what some of our more recent weights had been that we could estimate and calculate, and we came up with what we thought was a fair average Saturday disposal amount, and offered to Whitefish Bay that we would cover that amount. That then we would pull that out of the amount that was invoiced to them. That way we get around that whole they're not responsible for it. We're collecting the revenue. We're keeping the revenue because we're paying for it, and we're collecting it. To this point, I've not had a response from that counter. So I think that's something that we will, continue to work through. But in my mind, that really kind of answers all of the issues. I think when people pull in, it's in Shorewood, so they do probably expect to see a Shorewood employee, at the gate, checking them in, taking their money. That's not to say it couldn't be a Whitefish Bay employee. But like I said, if we are going through the process, the procedure, the trouble, the time to collect the revenue, run it through our system, do the deposits, make all the checks, then I think we should keep it. If Whitefish Bay really strongly prefers that they should be keeping the revenue from Saturdays, then I would propose that their employees collect the money and it runs through their village financial system.
And can you give us a ballpark on typical revenue on Saturdays? Hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars?
Well, it depends how busy it is. But yes, often it's hundreds of dollars. It can really range anywhere from, we'll say the $600 range to over $1,000, depending on, how busy it is, what time of year. Typically your February's, Marches are going to be pretty slow. When people start spring cleaning during the summer, it tends to get busy. The first open January after the holiday season tends to be busy. So there's a pretty cyclical pattern that we can estimate and project. But I would say that's a fair range, maybe $600 to $1,200, depending.
Trustee Bockhorst, do you have any comments or questions? Okay, we'll wait to see if Trustee Bockhorst has anything after Trustee Stokebrand. Do you, if you'd like to chime in?
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions, and I guess it's kind of just generally speaking, I think we're all in favor of intergovernmental cooperation to save money, right? And I think this is one of the places like, the North Shore Dispatch that we all thought, we're going to not, break down some of those community boundaries and, save money and work together. I guess my question is kind of bigger long term. So we have this transfer station and we're looking at a DPW organizational study that talks about what do we do with this site? And I think we know we're tight at the site, right? We don't have enough room for a lot of the equipment we have. So is this, I know 2025 might seem like a long time away, but is this the time to start to have a discussion about, can the transfer station go to Whitefish Bay? And the weekend just tell me if I'm close. Is this something?
I think that's a very long-term discussion. I'm certainly no expert on their facilities. Based on what I think I know, I don't see a reasonable or viable site currently under their ownership. So that would, in my opinion, be really difficult to have in place by 2025.
But is there DPW yard? Because we don't have room. We're crammed. So they're crammed tighter than we are.
They're set up much differently than we are. Basically, their building and all of their vehicle storage is indoor. So at their current or their primary location, they have a building and a small employee parking lot. Across the street from that, in the village of Glendale, they own a parcel that previously operated as part of their public works site. That does include a building, an access drive, and then a larger area to the west of the building. Like I said, I've not done in-depth studies. I've been there a handful of times in my career, but that parcel that they own, which is actually located in the city of Glendale, currently, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but it would take quite an investment, probably the removal of the building on the site in order to facilitate a transfer station there. That's not something that in my conversations with any of the staff there, they've ever said, boy, we're really thinking about doing this. I'm not sure that that's something that's really on their radar.
And so they bought trucks that don't fit on our scales.
Correct.
And so we're only using it for our garbage trucks, and then we're subtracting from the total to figure out their weight.
Yes.
And so we're basically maintaining the scales for our trucks, but not theirs.
Their yard waste trucks are of a size that can utilize the scales, or the scale, excuse me, there's only one. But obviously the larger volume of material in and out is refuse.
And so looking at space again for our DPW yard and what we're going to do going forward, if we didn't have the scale and we only use it for waste and refuse, right?
Right, but the scale doesn't really take up any space.
Okay, besides it's the transfer station that takes up the most space. I'm just trying to think, going forward, excuse me, what's the best thing for the village? And this is a big discussion about, do we keep that site a DPW site? Do we move the DPW somewhere else and redevelop it? And I just think that the transfer station it's a part of that discussion. And if you want to keep operations in the village, and we're only using 40%, they're using 60, they're not using the scales we're maintaining. I don't, it just seems like we're really being shorted. And again, it begs the question of the refuse. Should we outsource it? And when you look at communities inclined to encourage conservation and perhaps charge more, I know our conservation committee has talked about charging more to people who use more. So the people who are, recycling more and throwing less into the landfill maybe should pay less. And I just wonder if we continue to go down that road, and I hope we do, our community's different than Whitefish Bay, right? And going forward, looking at switching those models out a little bit, what works best for us. And I guess it's a good time to look back at the organizational study. It does seem like we need to do something different here. I just hope that we keep in mind a big picture instead of just the little short-sighted, how do we fix the funding model on Saturday now? Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Stokbrand. Now, I just want, Rebecca?
Well, I just wanted to follow up on Kathy's comments by reiterating that I think that this is the long-term conversation that we will be having in years to come, while we're looking at the transfer agreement or our agreement with Whitefish Bay now with respect to the transfer station. It's one step. And so we want to conclude this housekeeping activity, which I think is important because it does speak to how it's working and is it equitable. So I think it's a good time to have that discussion. But I concur with Trustee Stokbrand that we'll continue to have conversations regarding the use of the transfer station and what we see as our future needs. So I'm looking forward to having that discussion. I know you probably never hear that. I can't wait to have a conversation about the transfer station. But what we want to do is also get some of our current agreements in order, because it's also an opportunity for you as a group to learn how it's set up. So if we do, as we lean into those discussions, it really gives you that background and framework in terms of how to approach it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And, I just concur. I think this is a much bigger conversation. These are conversations that we're having or we're starting to have. I think we're all on the same page with this one. I don't think we're not trying to be short-sighted. We're looking at the big picture holistically, short-term and long-term. So, Trustee Bockhorst, do you have any comments or questions on this topic?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne, for all of that, and
Sure.
Kathy for the questions. And
Do you mind
Great.
if I ask a clarification question?
Yes.
Just as we proceed through the process, could you either yay or nay your agreement or disagreement with our recommendation regarding the responsibility of the collection of revenue? That the staff recommendation was that Shorewood staff collected it. The model should be adjusted such that Shorewood kept the revenue. If in fact Whitefish Bay was very set on keeping the revenue, then the model should be adjusted and process should be adjusted such that Whitefish Bay employees actually collected the revenue.
Do you feel comfortable with that? With Whitefish Bay collecting the revenue and doing processing and doing all of that? Is that something you feel comfortable with?
If it's not if the money isn't entering or working through Shorewood employee hands, then then I guess it's not really my my sphere of influence, so to speak. So yes, but again, I do feel very strongly about our employees having that responsibility and being on the hook for that, and then the village receiving no benefit from that work and that investment.
100%, man. I would personally 100% agree with all of that. And as long as there's no, liability for us of other people collecting money, if on our property, I would say I first lean towards, the option that you laid out, us collecting the revenue and us keeping the revenue. I think that's, yes, 100%. If they want to, collect the revenue, I think I'd be open to that. I just want to make sure that we're covering all of our bases with that. So if something goes missing, or some money is, somebody has questions the money that was taken, these things come up all the time. I want to make sure that's not going back to Shorewood. So that's all I'd be concerned with that. But I think your recommendation is something that I would agree with. I'd be on board with. So, Trustee Bachhorst, Trustee Baldoff, do you agree?
That makes sense to me.
All right. And then do you need a recommendation? Do you need approval for us to continue with the first part of the conversation with the reviewing the contract?
Rebecca, do you have thoughts on that? Is a formal action necessary, or will we just continue to work through that?
Formal action will be good from this group.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, yep. And I didn't necessarily see a recommendation.
No, there was not a motion. Rebecca, do you have a
so I would say
suggestion?
I move to review transfer station operations to ensure appropriate allocation of costs and to maximize cost efficiency. Or I move to review transfer station operations.
In conjunction with the items, the 3 action items listed within the memo, which include the cost allocation equity, invoicing structure, and implementation of adjusted monthly administrative fee.
Perfect.
If you may allow me to suggest that.
So moved. Great suggestion.
Second.
All in favor? All right, me too. All right, so I will take a motion to adjourn Public Works.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you so much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Tammy's an aye as well. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess at this time, we will open up the JPL committee meeting, or wait, is it time yet? Yes. So we have 2 items on the agenda this evening. I might have to jump onto my phone because something's going on with my internet. So anyway, so I'm on that as well. 2 items tonight. First order of business is to consider the approval of the Park and Beach permit application for Eastside Senior Services Yoga in the Park event on Saturday, August 21st, 2021. Am I taking this, or Sarah, are you leading?
I'll just give a quick introduction. So part of approving the new park and beach permits, new events come typically to JPL, so you might be getting quite a few of these in the near future. This is just to have yoga in Hubbard Park on Saturday, August 21st, from the hours of 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. And Russ Davis has approved that this would be fine over at that time frame in that area. So unless there's any questions, I would just need a motion to recommend to the board.
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the application for park and beach permit for Hubbard Park for the Eastside Senior Services Yoga in the Park event on Saturday, August 21st from 9 to 10:30 a.m.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay.
Aye.
Perfect, 3-0. And then the next item is a parade permit for the Chris Kegel Slow Roll on Sunday, September 26th in 2001. So typically they have done this event. This is a new event for Shorewood. They will be starting down by, they've typically done it by the state fairgrounds and rode around the Hank Aaron Trail. And now they're partnering with the War Memorial. So they will be starting in that general direction and going up Lincoln Memorial Drive to Lake Drive and then coming back around on the Oak Leaf Trail. So at this time, staff is recommending approval. They will be following the rules of the road. They are getting approval from, let me just pull that up quick, from Milwaukee County Parks on Thursday, which they don't see any issues with. And the city of Milwaukee is not requiring a permit for them, but will not be closing the road. And so they will be doing the same thing as with following the rules of the road. So there will be no actual road closure in the city itself. With that, I'll take any additional questions.
Did you say we're going to close the road here in Shorewood or not?
We are
Casey?
not. Nope,
Okay.
nope. We had advised them to follow just the rules of the road.
Great.
And so it's not a race. It's an idea that it's a family-friendly event. So people wouldn't be racing. They should be going kind of at a slow to moderate pace.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with this event from when I worked for Milwaukee County, and I think it's great that they're going to come through Shorewood. So I'm very excited to recommend approval for this. And I'm ready to make a motion if we're ready for one.
Yes, please.
By all means.
All right, I move to recommend to the village board the parade permit application for the Chris Kegel Slow Roll Sunday, September 26th, 2021.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? I do have a point, but I'll allow you two to speak first.
Nope.
Okay, so thank you, Sarah, for clarifying that we were not going to close Kensington, Lincoln Memorial up to Kensington or throughout Shorewood. So I know how difficult that is along Lake Drive, and also running the Lakefront Marathon many times. They never close it, and it's actually nice to have, you know, the spectators up that route. But are all the costs then that are incurred in this, do we feel that this is, well, of course you do, because you guys set the schedule on this and everything. So I guess I'm also, just like Melissa said, grateful when we can have these kind of community activities that encourage so many great things, health and wellness, and involve the community and go across communities as well. So looking forward to the event. And also I work down in the downtown district, so I know that we would not have been able to close the roads there either. So anyway, so any other comments? If not, we can go ahead and, all right. So with no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Arthur is an aye. Okay, all right, 3-0.
Excellent.
That concludes JP&L for this evening. So again, I have a motion to adjourn. I'm sorry,
So
Sarah,
moved.
did you have something you wanted to say?
I don't. We will just have, so I'll take a motion to adjourn. Strategic initiatives isn't scheduled till 7:10, so we'll have a little time for a break.
All right, great. So Arthur, you said,
So moved.
okay.
I move to,
Second.
Okay, all right, adjourned. We'll see you guys at 7:10.
Okay, thank you guys.
we'll just stay on this link, I'd assume.
Yes, it'll be the same link. You can just turn off your camera and mute yourself till 7:10.
Make sure you mute yourself.
Yeah.
All right, I see that it is 7:10 and we are all here. So we have one item before us today on the agenda, and that is to consider the service agreement and relationship agreement for audio and video improvements for meeting rooms. So Tyler, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Trustee Bodoff. So tonight in front of you is a service and relationship agreement with Marco to do audio and video improvements. This was an item that we had included in the 2021 budget, the capital budget, and the village board did approve authorization to do an RFP process for this. Thank you for Trustee Ursink for serving on the committee who did the interviews with the vendors. We did 6 walkthroughs with different companies, ended up getting 2 complete proposals, and Marco was the selected vendor. As we started the or right before we started the RFP process, we changed the scope, what we originally included in the budget. Just when we originally did the budget, I think there was a lot different frame of mind of the AV improvements that would be needed for our meetings, as you know, just the whole thought process as far as the pandemic and all has really changed as far as our needs from an AV perspective. So we ended up adding a lot more to the scope of services that we originally thought. So as a result, that's why the number that we have is much higher than what was included in the budget. The good news is we have the ARPA funding that we feel this is a perfect, a really good reason for the expenses that we would apply all that. So originally we were thinking of using some Benjamin Fund and a library for the bequest fund that they have. But all the ARPA, we feel that could be able to pay for that to save some of those expenses. So I think the proposal itself outlines a lot of the improvements, but just to summarize big picture, this would allow for live streaming capability for our meetings. So moving forward, people would still be able to participate and attend meetings virtually. We try to do a process that allowed for capabilities of better downloading of the meetings to help staff. So we feel the proposal will meet those needs for sure. And the other concern that we've had a lot of times is if someone is attending a meeting virtually, getting better sound, or if someone's watching the meeting, getting better sound. So a lot of the improvements that are included in the proposal should improve the audio portion of the meetings quite a bit, which we're excited about. So I thank Drew for attending. Drew is the sales rep and the customer service rep that we've been working with Marco. So if you have any particular questions, feel free to ask Drew. Otherwise tonight, we're just asking for approval on the service agreement and the relationship agreement. And then if you as a committee recommend to move forward, this will be on the consent agenda. We won't have Drew for the full board. So if any of you have any questions, now would be the time to ask that. The last thing I'll mention is if approved tonight at the board, we're going to start the work right away. And our hope is to try to get the courtroom and the village hall committee room done prior to September or sometime by September, knowing that that would be maybe the time frame that we go back to in-person meetings. So that would be our top priority to get that started right away. I think that summarizes my talking points. So if any of you have any questions on the proposal itself, feel free to ask away.
Thanks, Tyler. I think that sounds great. I don't have any questions, but I'll open it up to the other trustees in case they have any about this. It seems to me like a great investment in those federal dollars to make sure that our meetings are going to be as accessible as possible for people to participate. To me, modernizing the process will make it possible for more people to participate. So I will go ahead, and it looks like I see several hands up. So I'll go Trustee Bockhorst, then Trustee Ursink, and then Trustee Stokebrand.
Thank you. So I want to thank you for the hard work, Tyler. I've been here since the beginning, well before we had the videoing, and we've gone through many iterations. The pandemic, if one of the positives, of course, is that it's taught us that we need to be able to be nimble, and that we do need to up our game. Fortunately, there was Zoom. But now I appreciate the hard work. I like the multiple committee rooms, the live streaming aspect. And as a board, even though we do have the capabilities to, do a hybrid model of in-person and virtual, we can always change that policy at any time, depending. So I think that that's something perhaps for a future date, but, we'll have to ensure that people are still continuing to be active and, how do we call it? Sensible participants in an online environment, because I know we found that sometimes people will do things that they wouldn't otherwise do in person when they're behind a screen. I also like the city of Milwaukee, and that's a much different beast. They have, a very robust and professionalized system. This is getting us, taking major strides in that direction. I understand that, there's a lot of cost improvements. I really, really appreciate that we are using the federal funds for this. This is a service that's not just for our community, but beyond, especially. So anyway, I don't have any direct questions at this point, but I just wanted to say that, again, thank you for the hard work. Glad this was brought forward. And thanks, Arthur. I appreciate that you were part of the discussion and decision-making, given your background and technical expertise, I'll say, and production expertise. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Bockhorst. No, I think, while sitting on these interviews, the real goal here was to try to mimic this scenario as much as we possibly could. We found a lot of success with the community. We found a lot of community engagement with this model, being on Zoom, and to the point where we want to keep this and we want to build off of it. There's been times where there's been 300, 200, 100 people in a meeting, and that's really what we want. We want to engage the public. We want the public to see and know what we're doing. And, we want to be able to have just a variety of different ways to, for the trustees to communicate as well as the public to communicate. So I think that was the real goal and priority with the conversations. And I think, Marco came to the table, and they really, they really did a fantastic job listening to us and laying out exactly kind of what we wanted. So really excited to work with the folks at Marco, and really excited to finally be in person at a village board meeting, because I know I've sat on this board now for over a year and I have done it from my basement. So looking forward to getting inside Village Hall and excuse me, seeing everybody in person. So thank you so much. Trustee Stokebrand, sorry.
We may have lost Trustee Stokebrand to another committee meeting at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up if there's any members of the public who are on and have any thing to add, but I don't see any other hands raised here. So I think at this point, with no other discussion, we are ready for a motion.
Okay.
I would love to make the motion if I could. So I move to approve a service and relation agreement for audio and video improvements for meeting rooms with Marco.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
All right.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then I think, do we have a motion to adjourn Strategic Initiatives
So
Committee?
moved.
Second,
All right, all those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, see everybody in
Wow.
10 minutes.
Thanks,
Some
Drew.
efficient
And go Bucks.
running
Look forward to
here,
working
you
with you all.
guys.
Thanks, Drew. Appreciate it, Drew.
Yeah, thanks, Drew.
Talk to you
Thanks,
guys soon.
Tyler.